Hello, I'm Hilary Wright, an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. Welcome to my video tutorial for the Gumball machine card I created using the Still Scenes bundle, notably the Snow Globe Scenes dies. I hope you enjoy. This card can be loaded and reloaded using mini Smarties, which we can buy in the UK in either small bags or little boxes. You may be able to find similar sweets in your area, and providing these separately to the card enables this to be a more hygienic, for example for craft fairs. Yesterday I created a second example, which was a Halloween version of this card, and here's it in operation. It was a little difficult with the camera angles not to get my fingers in the way. The machine can be loaded and reloaded using the hole at the top of the card to push sweets into the mechanism. You may need to shake the card a little to get them into the dome. And when turning the card upside down and shaking, you can see that the sweets do not fall back out. Here are the supplies I used for the creation of this card. I'm just going to go through the card needed for this project. You'll need a piece of A4 black card, which will be cut in half lengthwise, and then from the other half of that card you'll have a piece of scrap paper which is used for the accents on the card. From an A4 sheet of pumpkin pie you'll need to cut 2 layers for the front of the card, and a smaller layer and a larger layer. The measurements are on the screen. The larger layer will have some scoring done on it. The details of that will be provided later in the tutorial. You'll also need some DSP, which will be for the decorations on the card. I have used the Monster Bash DSP for this card. Using one of the sheets of the Monster Bash DSP, the one with all the characters in frames, I used the one which is on the bottom right hand corner, but as you can see from the picture all the characters are different. I could have used any of these. The reverse of this DSP is a newspaper type print, and I use this for the background of my other Halloween card. The background of the globe was a castle taken from a different sheet of DSP from the same pack, and I cut that specifically to shape of the dome to maximise the use of the paper. You're going to need to score your top layer, so with your trimmer or your scoreboard you're going to take your larger layer, layer number 1, which is 170mm by 127mm. The inches equivalent was given earlier in the tutorial. You're going to score this at 6.5mm or 1/4 of an inch. Then move it to the 13mm or 1/2 inch measurement and score again. Turn the card through 90 degrees and score again at the same 2 measurements. You'll then need to repeat this on all 4 sides of the card. The following clips are just showing you the sizes of the card I have used, and the actual sizes can be seen earlier in the tutorial. The piece of DSP for the back of the globe I'd actually cut 1/2 centimetre too long. I actually therefore cut it down by 1/2 centimetre. I'm not sure I needed to do this, but it was the measurement I had written up. I also used a few pieces of scrap card or the leftover card from the layers. One black piece, one white piece and an orange piece missing from this picture. The black piece just needs to be big enough to hold the largest of the layering circles and the smallest one. I actually used the stitched circles for this. And the white piece needs to be big enough or long enough to hold a sentiment, and that will be, I've used the Halloween sentiment and I've actually stamped it twice, so I've got a long sentiment rather than a wide sentiment. The orange piece needs to be big enough to cut 2 of the globe bases, and these are used for the Gumball machine base. Next, with layer 1, the scored layer, you're going to cut the tabs at the corners. Please follow the written instructions on screen for this process. Here is a close-up of that corner. Next you'll need to glue the DSP layer to layer number 1. Make sure you glue across the whole of the DSP, as we're going to be cutting apertures out of this later. Now we want to fold the bottom of the card at the second score line, the inner score line. Make sure this is a nice crisp fold, therefore use the bone folder to do this. To punch the sweet cup hole, we'll be using the 1-inch punch. Turn over your card and on the reverse, mark up the centre point of the card. This will be used to line the punch and the card to make sure the hole is centralised. I have also marked up the centre point on my punch, and I can use this to align to the line I've made on the card. With the bottom of the card folded, push the punch into the maximum it can be and align to the centre points of the card and the punch, and punch a hole. Keep hold of this circle as we will be using it later. For die cutting I have used the black and the orange scrap card. For the die cut elements I have used the base and the globe from the Snow Globe Scenes dies, and the layering circles, the large and the small, or in my case I actually used the stitch circles large, and I actually used a 3 1/4 inch punch. I have also used the compass pointer from Smooth Sailing in the annual catalogue for the Gumball handle. I've used a small piece of Celebration DS cardstock as well, but this could be replaced with any cardstock of your choosing. Using a die cutting machine of your choice, you will first need to start cutting the circles in the black cardstock. The first thing you'll need to do is take your 1-inch punch to make a small aperture on the corner of the scrap piece of card. Keep this, as it will also be used again later. This creates a 1-inch hole which will be the centre of the frame of the sweet cup holder, and you will be using the 1 1/4 inch die to surround this to create the actual frame. I've used my retired 1 1/4 inch punch to do this. Using the black card, align the large circle die or the stitch circle die, whichever you're using, and on the orange card one of the globe bases, so that you need to produce 2 of these globe bases for the base of the gumball machine. Die cut these on your machine. With your die cut circle, you're going to take your globe and align this centrally on it, so you will cut an aperture out of this circle, the shape of the dome. Fix this in position with some washi tape so that it doesn't move when you're actually cutting it. Position your second globe base on the orange card, and if you're using the compass from the smooth sailing, on a piece of cardstock, remembering that you don't need to use this, you could actually use just a rectangular piece of card. I'm using the magnetic plate, so it's proving a little tricky to keep in position, but once I moved the cardstock it stayed put. Again, die cut these on the machine. Here I'm just aligning all the pieces on the page to see how they fit. With one of the globe bases and the 1-inch punch, in approximately the centre of the piece, punch a hole. Again, you will want to retain this piece as it's going to be used later as well. Align that globe base to the hole cut in layer 1, and then you realign all of the elements above that. Taking your globe, place that above the black frame of that you've previously die cut, and with a little bit of washi tape affix that, and then you will want to remove the back frame so that you don't miscut that a second time. Take away all your loose elements from the card, because we're now going to want to cut the globe into the layer 1 layer. Making sure it's straight, push this through your die cutting machine. Now it's time to assemble the Gumball machine on the layer 1 card. Start by aligning the bottom base with the sweet dispenser hole, and then the top base with the Gumball machine top, and if you notice on this card there's a little gap between the two when they're fully aligned. Don't worry about this little gap, as this will be fully covered by the sentiment on the finished card. Sorry, I forgot, I need to punch the hole for the handle to poke through. I have a 1/4 inch punch which I've done this with, but you could also use a single hole punch or indeed a crocodile. Punch this centrally between the sweet hole aperture and the actual globe aperture of the card. Taking one of your domes from your snow globe shaker domes, place the dome in the aperture and reposition all the die cut elements of the actual dome area. When you're happy with the top base piece, remove the black piece of the dome, and we're going to find out the position of the handle on that piece. Mark this up with a pencil. Punch this with your 1/4 inch punch or your equivalent tool in the area that you have marked up. Your black dome frame may overlap your handle hole, so you may want to trim the bottom of this to prevent it from catching when you actually turn the handle once it's fully assembled. Glue your dome frame to the card. and glue your lower base to the card, the one with the sweet hole dispenser in it. Now you're going to stick your dome into the card front. And then glue the top dome base to the card, matching up the holes carefully. From the scrap paper left from the die cut in the dome frame, I'm going to actually on the edge just trim a little piece off with the 1-inch punch. This will be in the dispenser cup to hold the sweets in when they are released. Glue this to the inside of the frame for the sweet dispenser cup. And then glue this smaller frame onto the card surrounding the sweet dispenser hole. Now I'm going to decorate the inside of the sweet dispenser using the DSP. Firstly I'm going to measure up the centre line of this card again because I want to put in a 1/2 inch circle punch at the centre point of this piece of card. Now I'm just going to align that within the dome to see where the top piece of the decoration is going to fit. And if you notice, when I've actually fully aligned it centrally in the dome, I found that I had to snip a little bit of the circle out in order to free up that whole of that 1/2 inch circle to enable the sweets to fall through into the mechanism below. Peel off the back side of the double-sided tape from the dome and then stick this onto your decorated piece of DSP. Or indeed, if you've decorated it yourself from on white, whisper white, obviously you want to do that onto your own self-decorated piece. And as you can see from my earlier card, I have actually decorated it using whisper white card and the Still Scenes globe, and I then took some of this Sear Silhouette DSP and cut with half-inch circles some coloured circles in order to represent the gumballs when there's no sweets in the card. Now we're going to move on to the sweet release mechanism, which is using the other piece of the pumpkin pie card, the layer number 2. Again, mark up the centre line as before, because we're going to use this to centralise some punching with the circles. And that'll be the 1-inch circle punch. So again, flush to the bottom of the card, you're going to punch a 1-inch circle in the centre point of this card. So I'm just here checking that the piece that I've just punched is lines perfectly straight on the underside of the top layer that we've designed earlier. So now we want to cut a channel. So what I've done is I've taken it to the 6.5mm to either side of that centre line, or that's 1/4 of an inch to either side of that centre line, and cut with the trimmer straight up. And that will be cut twice in order to create the channel. So I'm going to cut another punch circle, about a third of the punch, about a third to half of the punch, about 2mm up, about 1/4 of an inch up from the initial one that we've just punched. As you can see, there's a little small gap and there's a little straight piece of card above the first circle to the second circle. Now taking that piece that we've just punched and cut and laying it above your base, your layer that you've designed earlier, and one of the 1-inch pieces that you've punched, you'll want to have about a 2 to 3mm or 1/4 of an inch gap all the way around that to enable the mechanism to work smoothly. Mine obviously it needs to be a little bit trimmed, so I've taken the punch and I've just moved it a couple of millimetre up, quarter of an inch up, and punching a small segment of circle on both sides. So layering them up again and doing the same, and I've just going to swap to the black circle so that you can see this a bit more clearly. There's about 2 to 3 millimetre, quarter of an inch gap all the way around this once they're layered. So to make the sweet dispensing unit, I'm taking 3 of the circles that we've punched earlier, and so those are the 1 inch circles, and taking the ½ inch punch and about half to 2/3 of the punch through this. I'm punching a small sort of arch of cut out of each of those, and they should all be roughly equal because we're going to make up this as a 3D mechanism to release the sweets. So taking some mini dimensionals, either the white ones or the black ones, you're just going to put a mini dimensional in each of the centres of these cut 1 inch circles, and then you're going to layer three together. So a piece of circle, then a dimensional, another piece of circle, another dimensional, and then another piece of circle. So you now have a 3 pieces stuck together with mini dimensionals, and then we're going to take, this time I'm going to take the black mini dimensionals because they're going to potentially show through on to the front of the card because they're going to go through the handle hole. And again I'm going to put them in one in the centre of the card, but I need a little bit more depth for this, so I'm actually going to layer 2 together. So taking the top layer number 1, I'm going to push that through, and the dimensional will poke through to the top, and as you can see it will turn and within the card. So that's it. That's actually the mechanism built for the dispensing of the sweets. All we need to do is layer it up a little bit with the foam adhesive strips, and eventually later on we'll put a handle on the front. Now the foam adhesive strips, I'll probably use about 3.5 of those, and what you have to be careful of is the first bits around the channel need to be quite tight, close to the edge, because that will be where the sweet will come through from the top into the mechanism, and you don't want them to be falling through at all. So around the channel at the top, I'm just putting the strips all the way. I missed a piece, so I put a little bit at the top as well. Now I'm repeating that on the other side of the card. If you notice, I've used any small pieces left over at the end of each strip. I'm putting on the corners of the card. Next, I'm going to put foam adhesive strips all around the mechanism of the internal of the card, the mechanism hole and the sweet dispenser hole. Again, these need to be close to the edge so that sweets don't fall through into the card base. Likewise, we don't want any gaps in between the foam strips to enable a sweet to fall out of the mechanism and into the main body of the card. Here I'm putting foam adhesive strips all around the edges. They don't need to be solid, as the top layer, layer 1, will form a box around this mechanism. And repeat this on the other side of the card. On this side of the card, I'm going to put a foam adhesive strip on each side of the corner. This will help the top layer, layer number 1, form a box around layer number 2. Turn back to the side that doesn't have the double corner foam strips and remove all the backings. You'll then need to stick this to the layer 1 card base, and unfortunately I didn't score my layer 1 earlier, and I should have done, and it's harder to score once the dome is in place. You now want to stick the internal mechanism into the layer 1 card base, aligning all the holes. Be careful with this to make sure all your holes are perfectly aligned and the card is straight. Once it's straight and aligned, you want to just stick that down firmly. Now I'm just going to put some glue on each of the tabs to create a box around the internal mechanism. Again, remove the backings from all the adhesive foam strips. And glue down the edges of the card layer 1 to form a box around the internal mechanism layer 2, tucking in the tabs at each corner. Now we're going to add the handle to the front of the card. I've used the smooth sailing compass die for this handle, so just remove the backing from the mini dimensional that's poked through the handle hole. And taking your die cut piece from the smooth sailing dies, which is the compass handle, and attach this to the card. And once attached, you should just double check that it turns smoothly in the card. You'll probably find the compass piece is a little long for the dome. It will hit the dome as it turns, so I'm just trimming it down to ensure that once it turns fully, it doesn't hit the dome as it turns. Now just double check everything is turning smoothly, both sides of the card, and you can see here that the circle, the cup in the circles twists round, and it will take from the top a sweet and release it into the bottom. Now I'm going to cut a slot at the top to feed the sweets into the card. So I'm just cutting up the centre line right through from the back right to the front in the centre, and then across from each of the fold lines just in the half an inch or 6.5 millimeters on each fold line. So basically just the depth of the channel. I'm going to use red tape to stick the card to the base. I find it more secure for any cards. I'm actually cutting this right over the edges of the folds, so that will provide more tack or more security to the folds on each of the edges of the card. So now you'll see from this next clip that you can see the foam adhesive strips through the edges of the card, through the holes in the card. So in order to make this a little bit more polished, the finish, I'm going to take the scrap piece of black card and I'm going to cut 1/4 inch strips or 6.5 millimeter strips from this card, probably about 6 centimeters long, I think, which is approximately 2 3/8 inches, and this will depend on the channel length of your card, so you just need to measure this yourself. So just glue these to the inside of your channel. Now when you look through the hole in the globe, you'll see that it's black rather than the white of the foam adhesive strips. Make sure these are firmly stuck down because we don't want those to come loose. We're very nearly finished now. We just need to stick this to the base card. So taking the A4 cut in half sheet of black card and removing the tape from the back of the card front, we're going to now just stick this to that. Make sure you get it as straight as possible. Obviously with the red tape, once stuck, it's very difficult to remove. Now we have the back on the card, we're going to do a very similar exercise as we did with the channel to the sweet dispenser cup. So taking another strip of your black card, again the 6 centimeters by 6.5 millimeters, we're going to cut that down and we're going to then sort of slightly curve it and feed it into the edges of the sweet dispenser cup, just making a nice black internal to this cup, as similar to the channel above. You need a long sentiment to cover the middle of the base of the unit where the two globe bases meet. So I've taken the Happy Halloween from the Wonderfully Wicked stamp set, and I've stamped the Happy once, and then in the same line I've stamped the Halloween. This obviously takes a little bit of lining up to do. Just going to trim that down so it's nice and neat. And I'm going to trim a piece of black card to the same width as the sentiment. I'm going to use the triple banner punch to shape the edges of the sentiment and its layer. The sentiment needs to be flat on the card, so I'm going to glue it onto the card, but I only glue on each end of the sentiment, as the sweep dispenser unit needs to be free to move smoothly. So now, using Smarties or your selection of mini sweets, we're going to fill the card. I've selected from my Smarties just the orange and yellow ones to go with the Halloween theme. I've used other colours for the Gumball machines on the other cards. You fill the card from the slots created at the top of the card earlier. That we didn't bend them down earlier, so I'm just going to push them in with the tweezers to make the hole visible. And then you just feed in your Smarties one by one, shake them into so that they go into the dough and don't just block up in the channel. You now have a finished card, which you can use, and you do this by turning the handle. You might need to shake the card a little to get them from the channel into the mechanism, and then you can hear them drop into the mechanism, and then as you turn it around another 180 degrees they'll drop into the sweet dispenser cup. And you can reload if of course you haven't eaten them already. Our clear acetate boxes are a perfect fit for these cards, and they provide good protection to the card. Here are a selection of the cards I've created, my original Gumball, and I've also created a lovely Snowman Christmas one. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.